276. In the world of cars, that number is legendary. It's a number that represents a secret, a lie, and one of the greatest eras of automotive engineering. For 15 years, from 1989 to 2004, the Japanese car industry was stuck in a time warp. It didn't matter if you were looking at a fire-breathing twin-turbo Nissan Skyline, a revolutionary rotary-powered Mazda, or a mid-engine Honda NSX supercar. They all had one thing in common on the spec sheet. They all claimed to make the exact same amount of power, 276 horsepower. Was this just a bizarre coincidence? A statistical anomaly? Absolutely not. It was a carefully constructed fiction, a handshake agreement that became the silent engine driving the golden age of JDM cars. Today, we're going under the hood to investigate the engineering and politics behind the gentleman's agreement. And to understand this deliberate deception, we have to rewind the clock to the 1980s. Japan was experiencing an economic boom, but with it came a dark side. The media called it the traffic war. Roads were becoming more crowded, cars were getting faster, and tragically, traffic fatalities were soaring, exceeding 10,000 deaths per year. The public was concerned, and the Japanese government was poised to intervene with strict, potentially crippling regulations on the auto industry. To prevent the government from dropping the hammer, the major automakers decided to take matters into their own hands. The Japanese Automobile Manufacturers Association, or JAMA, came together and proposed a self-imposed solution. They would regulate themselves to show they were being responsible. They agreed on two key limitations. The first was a hard speed limiter set at 180 kilometers per hour, which is about 112 miles per hour. If you've ever owned or driven a true JDM import from that era, you know this one was very real. The moment that speedometer needle crept up to 180, the ECU would cut the fuel and the party was over. But the second limit was the one that would define a generation of cars. It was a cap on power. The members of JAMA agreed to limit all new production car engines to a maximum of 276 horsepower. This gentleman's agreement was officially born. Now, this is where the story gets really fascinating from an engineering standpoint. Think about the challenge. You have some of the most brilliant engineers in the world developing highly advanced multi-valve twin turbocharged engines, many of which were born from and destined for the brutal world of motorsport. How do you take these thoroughbred race engines and force them to produce the exact same power figure as, say, a naturally aspirated engine in a luxury sedan? The answer is simple in concept, but brilliant in execution. You choke them. You intentionally restrict their performance. But, and this is the crucial part, you do it in a way that is incredibly easy to reverse. Let's look at some of the key players. Exhibit A, the legendary Nissan Skyline GT-R, specifically the R32. Its heart was the RB26 DET-T engine, a twin-turbo inline-six that was, for all intents and purposes, a race motor detuned for the street. To comply with the 276 horsepower agreement, Nissan's engineers had to find a way to rein it in. Their solution was ingenious. They installed a tiny, simple brass restrictor in the boost control lines for the turbochargers. This small piece of metal physically limited the amount of boost pressure the turbos could generate, effectively putting a muzzle on the engine. But here's the wink and a nod. Nissan knew exactly what they were doing. They even painted the restrictor bright yellow, making it incredibly easy to spot. The unspoken message was clear. If a knowledgeable mechanic were to accidentally remove that little yellow marked restrictor during a routine service, well, the boost pressure would immediately jump and the car would instantly gain around 60 horsepower. No new parts, no complex tuning, just removing the leash that Nissan had been forced to put on it. Toyota, of course, had its own methods for its own icon, the MKIV Supra, the Japanese domestic market version, powered by the now immortal 2JZ GTE engine, was listed at, surprise, surprise, 276 horsepower. But Toyota gave us the smoking gun that proved the agreement was just for show. The gentleman's agreement only applied to cars sold inside Japan. When Toyota began exporting the Supra to North America and Europe, they weren't bound by that handshake deal. Suddenly, the same basic engine was now officially rated at 320 horsepower, with some markets even seeing 326. The export models had slightly different, more robust steel-wheeled turbochargers instead of the ceramic ones used in Japan, along with different fuel injectors, but the core engine was the same. This was concrete proof, straight from the manufacturer, right off the factory floor. By the time the late 1990s rolled around, the whole agreement had become an open secret, almost a running joke within the industry. Respected Japanese car magazines like Best Motoring would regularly feature these 276 horsepower machines, strap them to a chassis dynamometer, and publish the results for everyone to see. The numbers were often hilarious. The final evolution of the Skyline, the R34 GT-R, was officially rated at 276 horsepower, yet on the dyno it consistently put down over 330 horsepower at the wheels. Mitsubishi and Subaru, their Lancer Evolutions and Impreza WRX STIs technically adhered to the horsepower figure, but horsepower stayed at 276, but the torque figures climbed steadily higher, making the cars feel dramatically quicker and more aggressive with each new generation. So, why does any of this matter today? Why should we care about a political maneuver and a white lie from over 30 years ago? Because the gentleman's agreement is the very reason the global tuner culture, as we know it, exploded. Think about the situation it created. You had manufacturers investing millions to build incredibly robust engines, designed to handle the stresses of motorsport and high horsepower applications. They were building engines capable of 500, 600, maybe even 800 horsepower reliably. And then they were forced to sell them to the public in a massively detuned state of 276 horsepower. This meant the core components, the engine block, the crankshaft, pistons, were absurdly over-engineered for the stock power levels. They were sleeping giants, just waiting to be woken up. Enthusiasts and tuning shops quickly realized this. They discovered that with a simple ECU remap to adjust fuel and timing, a less restrictive exhaust system, and maybe a slightly larger turbo, you could easily unlock double the factory horsepower without stressing the engine's internals. The agreement started to look archaic. The final nail in the coffin came in July of 2004. Ironically, it was Honda, a company often seen as more conservative and by the book, that broke the pact. They released the new Honda Legend, a luxury sedan with a 3.5-liter V6. And on the official spec sheet, they advertised its power as 300 PS. The spell was broken. There was no government crackdown. No automakers were punished. JAMA just quietly let the agreement fade into history. The era was over. Today, a new Nissan GT-R leaves the factory with around 600 horsepower. The speed limiters are gone, and the 276 horsepower lie is a relic of the past. But for that glorious 15-year window, the Japanese auto industry was defined by this incredible paradox. They built some of the most capable and tunable performance cars the world has ever seen, all while pretending they were holding back. It was a time when manufacturers sold us cars that were strictly forbidden, yet secretly unleashed. What is your favorite car from the legendary 276 horsepower era? The Skyline, the Supra, the RX-7, the NSX? Let me know your pick in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the politics of horsepower and the story behind this legendary number, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.